for an act in relating to intoxicating liquor, HB 230, and proposed by County of Maui. May I have a motion to accept?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, motion by Ms. Ford, second by Mr. Kanua. Any discussion? Hearing or seeing none?
Wait.
Oh,
Mr. When I read this, I'm not quite sure that I'm reading it. The justification sheet says, let me read this for the public. The purpose of the proposed bill is to authorize the county liquor commissions to provide funding for liquor abuse treatment and prevention with revenues collected through fines against licensees and license fees without the current 10% limitation. Now, the license fees, and I wish we had someone from the Liquor Commission here, but the license fees and fines fund that department. They don't get general funds from us. And so based on this particular law, they could expend almost all of their money in these programs. And for heaven knows that we need these programs. We really do. But when you just wipe out without the current 10% limitation, if they said, well, up to 15% or 20%, so to me it's a little more palatable. It's when you just wipe everything out and say, hey, they can do whatever they want, I get a little nervous. So I'm not comfortable with this one, and I'm not going to support it.
Mr. Kern?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I pretty much agree the same thing. Because they're not funded through the general fund and they're basically self-funded, it's important to have that metric, and it would be important to understand what that is. How much of that revenue do they bring in? Do they need to operate? And then we could maybe raise that up. But just to make it so it'd be wide open, it wouldn't make sense if you have a God forbid, a director, a person in there that isn't fiscally responsible or thinks in that way. They could potentially bankrupt that that agency. So I won't support this either, just out of common sense. I yield. Thank you.
Okay. Any other members? Okay. Hearing or seeing none. Mr. Clerk?
Ms. Eoff?
No.
Ms. Ford?
No.
Mr. Ilagan?
Yes.
Mr. Kanuha?
No.
Mr. Kern?
No.
Ms. Poindexter?
No.
Ms. Willie?
No.
Chair Onishi?
Aye.
Chair Onishi, you have 2 ayes,
Okay.
6 noes, and 1 excuse.
Okay. This item number 2 doesn't pass. Okay. Item number 3, which is a bill for an act relating to transportation proposed by County of Maui. I have a motion to accept.
Second.
Okay, so motion by Ms. Eoff, second by Ms. Ford. Any discussion?
Yeah.
Okay, Ms. Ford?
I'd like to call Mr. Ishida forward, do one of his fabulous first readings, explanation of whatever is going on here type thing. For the public, number 3, I'm going to read the justification. Government agencies have been reluctant to assume maintenance of roads whose ownership and jurisdiction are in dispute between the state and the counties. Government agencies are afraid that maintenance work on a road in limbo
Could result.
could result in the assumption of ownership and liability. The reluctance to assume maintenance has resulted in deterioration of roads in limbo, jeopardizing public safety. If enacted, the bill will provide an interim period in which a government agency can perform maintenance and improvement activities without the fear of liability. Mr. Ishida, first they're talking about roads that are in dispute between the state and the county. Are those always roads in limbo, or can they be other types of roads?
They could be other roads. As a matter of fact, in prior years, there was a significant dispute as to portions of Saddle Road, whether it was the county or state's responsibility to speak up. And, that resulted in significant litigation activity. So it's not just roads in limbo that we're talking about. It may be, answer your question, it could be other roads as well.
Okay. Also, this particular, if you look at article or subsection E, it talks about the county shall not, I'm quoting only a portion of this, the county shall not be liable to any person for injury or damage sustained while that person is using that road for a period of 10 years following the acceptance of that road by resolution. This is if we accept by dedication of the road. Do you have a comment on that, Mr. Ishida?
Well, any provision in any laws that limit the liability exposure of the county, we're generally going to be in favor of that. That's going to be my short answer every time. I'm not, let me just say that there's a significant, and the reason we take that position is not to be unfair, because if there are legitimate claims out there, we fairly look at them, and if we're at fault, we'll pay, and we'll pay fairly. But sometimes, Ms. Ford and members of the committee, the reason we have to take a more aggressive stance with respect to legislation, especially at the statewide level, is because there is a formidable lobbying group. It's no secret, so I'll just say they're called the Consumer Lawyers Lobby, and essentially they're advocate on behalf of plaintiff attorneys. And as you know, state and county and governments can be fertile, deep-pocket targets sometimes. I'm not suggesting that all lawsuits are non-meritorious. Many are. But there is that battle that goes on at the state legislative level. So the Corporation Counsel groups, together with the Attorney General, we work together to look at laws that are fair. And oftentimes that involves limiting liability in cases where we're attempting to do things in good faith.
Okay. Let me go on a little bit more. Would you refresh the council's, the committee's memory on the roads in limbo issue between the state and the county? With these roads in limbo, if I understand it correctly, the state passed a law and said, we're stuck. We, the county, are stuck with these roads.
Yeah.
And there's still discussion on that.
Well, what the statute basically says is, unless it's a state road, it's a county road. So that by definitional default means that what we call roads in limbo, or ones that are not specifically designated as state highways, by statutory default arguably become the responsibility of the counties.
Okay. And if that's correct, and that's my understanding too, these roads that fall now within the jurisdiction of the county need to be maintained by the county. And that brings up an issue of how many billions of dollars do we need to fix all of these roads in limbo? And I'm sure Warren Lee would be the first to tell us he doesn't have billions of dollars in his budget. So do you have any comments on the fact that we would be required under this law to physically improve these roads?
Well, Ms. Ford, I'm not prepared to go on record and say that it is the county's responsibility, because I think that's, number one, that's irresponsible of me to do that, and number two, it may not be true.
Okay.
I think
that's fair.
I think that, given the current state of disagreement between the state and the counties with respect to ownership and maintenance responsibilities, I think that the question is better posed to the Department of Public Works in terms of maybe looking at their risk management plan in terms of addressing those roads or those conditions which are presently perhaps present the greatest risk of harm to our citizens. But to make a blanket statement that this is what it is, that it is our responsibility and our financial burden, I'm not prepared to agree that that is necessarily true. And I think any effort that Public Works makes in addressing this in a triage mode, I think is done with the best interests of and the safety of our citizens, and they're doing the best they can given their resources.
They are, and considering the budgets that we're constrained by, I think they are doing the best they can. I'm really uncomfortable with this particular thing. I mean, it'd be lovely if we could afford to do this, but I feel kind of dumped on by the state. it's nice to pass a law and say, hey, it's your responsibility, deal with it. And I'm not comfortable with that. On the other hand, the state doesn't have any problem taking away home rule from us. So I'm not going to support this one. Thank you, Mr. Ishida.
Okay, Ms. Willie.
Okay. I worked on that whole issue of roads in limbo a lot for dealing with the Lapa Hoi Hoi Homestead Government Road. And as far as I'm concerned, it's pretty clear that at least the roads in limbo are under the county jurisdiction. I mean, that, we all talk about supremacy and preemption. This is right as opposed to other situations. This one is on point. Or that provision of the law is on point. But I just want to say that with regard to Ms. Ford's question, I strongly feel that that doesn't mean that we are under what is our obligation in terms of repair. I know that in other states, for example, Maine, the people there are responsible to get it road up to grade before it's taken over by the county. And I also see that with these paper roads, it's not always the most unsafe. It's sometimes preference, but I'm going to, as I said before, I'm going to vote against everything here. But I would have I think that at some point we need Warren Lee to come in here and give a whole report on roads in limbo and deal with that. But this is, to me, is just something that's poorly written, and we would need more information to go forward with it. Thank you.
Okay, Ms. Poindexter.
Yeah, I'm leaning towards supporting this because, out of all the roads in limbo, my district has the most miles of roads in limbo. It's 50 plus miles. I think the next one that comes close to me is like 17 miles or something of roads in limbo. And unfortunately, we inherited a lot from the sugar company days when all the sugar companies closed along the coastline, which were a majority in, I think all of them actually were in my district. Oh no, except for Kauai and Keawan at one time. But so we have a lot of roads in limbo. 50 plus miles, and I think we're working on it slowly, looking at public safety, and I think they're doing a good job with selecting which ones are on an emergency need right now. And I think we could get more done if some of the liability is removed, and I think this kind of removes that liability. So I'm hoping that removing the liability will help us move forward and be able to do a little bit more of roads in limbo. And like I said, the majority of roads in limbo, a large majority, is in my district. So I am voting for this bill. So thank you.
Okay, any more discussion? Mr. Ishida, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Onishi. If I can just add, I didn't want, my comments earlier to be construed as not supporting any type of bill that limits the county's liability. Couple observations. Number one, going back to what Ms. Ford said about subsection E, where she talked about adoption by resolution. In that situation, the road, I presume or assume, is going to be up to dedicable standards. Well, it doesn't have to say that because we have an ordinance, a standalone ordinance that requires that.
Great.
So my presumption, Ms. Ford, maybe, you can give your perspective on that, but E would just be a situation that would really actually provide us a greater buffer of protection because it's saying here we're accepting a dedicated road. I think that's what it would mean. And then we have this 10-year window of protection, which is always nice. And the second point is just rereading the first part of the bill. It basically gives the county the same protection that the state would enjoy under Chapter 662. And, I think that's a big thing for Public Works because right now, I know that from the lawsuits that we've seen in the past, the reluctance sometimes on the part of Public Works in conducting even routine maintenance, even cutting back the grass that, overhangs onto the roadway, has been this belief out there that says, hey, if we touch it, we're going to be liable. So the best thing is don't touch it. This
Mike.
gives the county and Public Works, some good incentive to do the maintenance without having to worry about getting sued, every time they start up a lawnmower or a weed whacker or something. So, I don't vote. You guys do, but I just wanted to add that. I thank you letting me share
Mr.
that.
Kern?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Reading it over and over and hearing the discussion and hearing Mr. Ishida up there, I don't really have a problem with this because it seems to me it would actually allow more roads to get fixed, which is always a good thing as long as we have the money. And when taking the liability away, it's going to be easier because that's what I've noticed over the years. What happens? It's not ours, and it's just and there might even be another definition than a road in limbo because we already have the law that if it is deemed as a road in limbo, then it's the county. But I'm sure there are other roads that might fall out of that category or somewhere in that flux. And I think having something where if the road can get fixed, the road can get repaired, the road can have some maintenance on it, be it state or county, and it's not going to be a liability issue. It's actually going to allow it to be fixed.
Mike just.
It's actually going to allow it to be fixed. I don't see a problem with that. Obviously, if it's done in a fiscally responsible manner, but we know that there's a lot of roads out there that need a lot of help. So I would support this, even though I am truly frustrated with Maui and some of the other counties for squashing all the other bills. So I yield. Thank you.
Okay, Ms. Seoff?
Thank you, Mr. Ishida, too, for clarifying that point, because our experience with roads and limbos in the past has been frustrating, and removing the liability and opening up the options to coordinate quicker repairs, and maybe some of them are minor, but we've had problems getting them done. I'm tending to support this one. Thank you.
Okay, Ms. Poindexter?
Yes, I'd just like to say too, I'm working on a couple of the roads in limbo in some of my areas, in my district. And what we're doing is not just only, the burden is not only on the county, but the burden is on the community where the road in limbo is. And they've been really wanting to partner up and provide funding for contractors to come in and partner up with the Department of Public Works to meet the county dedicable standards. So they get a packet, they come into an agreement with that the asphalt needs to be so much in height or whatever. I see Brandon here. Brandon, can I call you up real quick?
Or have the chair
Thanks.
call.
No, she can go.
Yeah.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Introduce yourself.
Yeah.
Brandon Gonzalez, Deputy Director, Department of Public Works.
Can you just kind of explain how that works? There's a partnership, kind of like is it a pilot program that we're working on where we work with different communities on the roads in limbo and meeting, what kind of standards do they have to meet so that it becomes dedicable back to the county? Or are you you're definitely, of course,
Okay, so a few years ago, there was some legislation from the council to create a program to help communities and areas bring roads that were not up to county standard to a minimum standard where the county could consider receiving them for dedication. And part of that agreement is the community would need to have a point person. They would have to sign an agreement with the county so that they would have, the county would typically provide material. The community would provide the manpower and the expertise to put down the material. Because a lot of these communities would have contractors and volunteers and manpower that were willing to do the work. So it was a partnership, and the county also provided minimum standard details for county standards for them to follow.
So thank you. So I think with that partnership, we're able to get to more roads in limbo. I think, especially those that are in an emergency need of repair. So, and for public safety. So, thank you.
Okay, Ms. Willie?
Okay. I want to acknowledge what Councilmember Poindexter said, and I do this case. I mean, I think there's, when I talk about, I don't really like how it's written, okay? Even supporting what you all are saying. But I just want to know, can we, as a county, do something along the line of what it says in E, or however we wanted to write it, protection of liability, without getting into E, with regard to roads that aren't up to dedicable standards, regardless of whether whether they're in dispute as to ownership, put something, protection against liability. Can we write something better and do it on a county level? That's what I want to know.
I don't believe so. I think with respect to tort liability, that's something that
we need to do it on
is clearly
we'd have to do it on
superseded by state. Yeah.
Okay, and wouldn't you see how it has here in this online 22, and then over on page 3:1, whose ownership is in dispute? You see what my concern is there, where it's shall not be liable. It's where there's ownership in dispute.
What you're saying is you've made the plaintiff's argument.
Yeah.
I see that, and which is why
okay.
earlier.
Okay, thank you. And I appreciate what the others have said. I'm going to vote against all of these just as an anti-Maui move, so.
Ms. Ford?
Thank you. Hang on, guys. All right, the justification talks about roads in limbo. That was the justification. But the bill doesn't mention roads in limbo. It specifically says a road whose ownership is in dispute between the state and the county. So this is a government road in dispute between the state and the county. It's not a private road owned by road maintenance organization or a developer who is 60 years gone. You know, he's not even there anymore. Am I correct in what I've said so far? One of you?
Okay,
Brandon?
thank you. That's a very good observation, Councilmember Ford. And I'd like to, basically you're reading it, whose ownership is in dispute between the state and the county.
Yes.
Yeah, so that's how it reads. That's the plain language of the statute. And if I may go a little
Please.
back a little further. So I ran over here as fast as my stubby little legs could carry me. Which is why I was out of breath when I was answering Councilmember Poindexter's questions. To take it a step backwards, for our county government at the closest level to the people, we are fortunate to be most in tune with the concerns and needs of our constituents and the people that live on our island and in our neighborhoods. So, what we have identified is that the roads in limbo, it's a dispute between who actually owns the roads between state and county. But in the meantime, these roads deteriorate and the people that use the roads still suffer. So, we have undertaken a program every year to try and address roads in limbo in districts that are most in need of being worked on. Part of that, though, has been this mentality that if you touch, you take. And if you take everything with it. Meaning if something catastrophic or bad happens on it, you touched it, you are going to be blamed for it. So, that's kind of where, and I'm simplifying it, but that's just me trying to explain it. The counties all have this issue. And for Maui County, I think in the papers in the last few years, they had a bridge, if I recall correctly, that fell into this category of being in limbo. And it was unclear whether the state or the county would be undertaking the repair efforts. So that's why it might be a little bit more general to answer your question. But when we get back to the road question, this is to give the counties, like Lincoln had said earlier, similar protection that the state enjoys if they touch roads where ownership hasn't been clearly given to them. Like, we'll help, and we'll help maintain. But if there's a dispute over the ownership, we're not going to be the only ones that you can blame, right? We have this protection. And then as Councilmember Willie pointed out, if a plaintiff wants to say, well, no, ownership is established, then that's going to be their legal argument. But that's the genesis of this, where County of Hawaii, Maui, Kauai all face this issue, even Oahu to a certain degree. And that's all we're looking for, is trying to get some of the same protections for touching it as the state enjoys, so that the people can get some relief.
Okay, Mr. Gonzalez, thank you for explaining that, but I have some additional concerns on this. The legislation you alluded to that we passed was, I believe, Mr. Yagong's legislation. It was to allow the county to provide materials for private roads that were being used for a public purpose. Okay, that is a separate issue from what we've got in front of us. I have no problem granting ourselves the immunity from liability, as you both have discussed. My concern is still that this has nothing to do with roads in limbo per se, because the bill doesn't say that. It just says maintaining or repairing a road whose ownership is in dispute between the state and the county. So I have to, number one, say it's got to be a so-called governmental road. That's number one. Secondly, it could be a road in limbo. It could also be a paper road that doesn't even exist on the ground, just on a piece of paper. And I'm concerned about the way the bill has been written. I agree with that Mr. Lincoln is correct, that the state has to make this kind of a change to authorize this, but it just seems to me that they could have been a lot more clear about the type of roads that they were dealing with. Because if anyone here thinks that this deals with a private road, it does not. Am I correct in that? It is not private roads that are substandard. These are governmental roads.
Yes, you're correct. That's made clear in Section 1 of the preamble of the bill, that's what they're talking about.
Okay. So the problem that I'm facing in my district, I do have some roads in limbo, more than a few, especially South Kona, Ka'u. And the problem that I get most frequently is that I have private roads that they are substandard and they want to dedicate them, which we will not take. And I understand why. I'm not arguing that. But I'm afraid that this bill is going, even though I think it's clear that it's a governmental road, I'm not sure that this is written in as well as it could be to clarify the problems that we're having with roads in limbo and other types of roads, governmental roads, that may be falling under the need for our Public Works Department to be fixing them in some way. I'm real concerned about that. Then, Brandon, Mr. Gonzalez, you mentioned you got to sign an agreement. Okay, first of all, if it's a governmental road, who are we signing an agreement with? The people, no, the government, either it's the state of Hawaii that owns it, or it's the county of Hawaii, or maybe the federal government, but highly unlikely. You're saying we have to sign an agreement with somebody. There's nobody to sign an agreement with except maybe the state of Hawaii, because there's something in here that says if the county requests or requires title to a disputed road, the state may quit claim whatever interest it has in the road to the county. That's the only, quote, contract that I can see that this bill addresses. It's not about the people, because the people don't own the road. It's either the state or the county. Am I misunderstanding something in here?
Okay, so I may have to ask you to ask your question again.
Okay.
Because I was still on the issue of what type of road we're talking about. And as Mr. Ashita pointed out, in Section 1, we're talking about roads in limbo, roads whose ownership and jurisdiction are in dispute between the state and the counties.
Yes.
So that is the framework of which this is applicable.
Translation, it means a government road, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
So, and it's consistent throughout that there's no presumption that a county owns the particular street, road, or highway, even if we touch it, but that the ownership is in dispute between the state and the county.
Right.
Okay. So that is consistent throughout.
That is consistent. But
Okay, so, sorry, could you ask your question again? Yeah.
You had mentioned that we would have to sign some kind of a contract or an agreement with the people. And my comment is either that was just a misstatement, which is understandable, because the only agency that can sign a contract over this road is the state in turning it, quit claiming it over to us. People do not own government roads.
Okay, good. I understand your question now, and I should clarify it. When I meant signing an agreement, I was talking specifically about the program for materials that the county provides. So basically, it's an agreement saying that, yes, the county can provide you AC or gravel, and you are agreeing to use it for this specific purpose and to use it and build it to the specific standards. The county signs that because we're providing the material.
But who are, let's see, let me see how I will say this. I'm desperate to get these roads fixed, guys. It's not that, but I'm seeing a real problem here.
Can I interrupt fast?
Yes.
Okay, I think we're talking about two different issues. One is they're talking about government roads, any government roads that's in dispute of who owns
Right.
it. Okay, then what Ms. Poindexter mentioned was about private roads.
No,
Or
I'm talking about roads in limbo.
well, roads in limbo.
Yeah.
But then what I'm saying,
Not
there's an agreement. No, but there's an agreement that a group is gonna get the material from the county, but they are responsible to do the repairs. Okay, so it's a private person that gotta do it. It's not the county's gonna do it. That's what I mean. Okay,
Okay.
so that's why I think there's a two mix.
All right.
So this is two different.
Well, I'm not quite sure that it is different. So, Mr. Gonzalez, are you going to go out and sign a contract for this material you're going to provide with Joe Blow?
Actually, the framework is a little bit more specific. We take a look first at whether or not the right-of-way is a government road or if it's just a driveway, right? And then the individuals or the group that is doing the work has to agree to indemnify and the county.
Do they have the right to indemnify for everybody on that road?
Yes, we ask for the groups, we ask that they provide information that they have a consensus of the group that they're representing.
How do they prove that?
They can submit it by letters. If they are part of a neighborhood organization, then the action of the organization, they can have it in their minutes.
Okay, Ms. Ford, can
I'm
we?
gonna yield.
Okay, thank you. Okay, any other discussions? Okay, hearing and seeing none, Mr. Clerk.
Ms. Eoff,
Aye.
Ms. Ford,
No.
Mr. Ilagan,
Aye.
Mr. Kanuha, Mr. Kern,
Aye.
Ms. Poindexter,
Aye?
Ms. Willie,
No.
Chair Onishi.
Aye.
Chair Onishi, you have 6 ayes, 2 noes, and 1 excused.
Okay, and so item number 3 is passed, is accepted. Okay, so let's go. Okay, council members, we are 15 minutes behind. We have 2 more items, and I would want to at least finish those first. Okay, so let's do item number 4, and it's a bill for an act relating to liability proposed to accept.
Second.
Ford. Okay, motion by Ms. Ford, second by Mr. Kern. Go ahead, Ms. Ford.
Thank you. I want to support this one. All it's doing is taking out the sunset dates on this particular act when it was it became effective. There's no reason that it should sunset. We need to be able to post signs and do anything else to protect the people who are on our beach parks, and I hope the whole council will support this.
Okay, Mr. Kern?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I too support this. This makes a lot of sense. I mean, the purpose of the bill amends certain acts to provide continuous liability protection for the state and county governments regarding the duty to warn the public of dangers on improved public lands and the actions of county lifeguards. Absolutely. In every way they possibly can. So this is a no-brainer to me, and I support this. I yield. Thank you.
Okay, any other discussions? Go ahead, Ms. Willie.
I think that this bill could stand on its own 2 feet, and I am going to vote against it as I'm disgusted with Maui, and in particular removing in the executive session my amendment to the proposed to Right to Farm Act. Anyway, I'm going to vote against it, and does not mean that I don't concur with this. I do think that if it were to not pass, that we could do something separate and submit it on the same point with that and not have any trouble getting it passed. So I will be opposing this.
Any other discussion? Hearing no seeing none. Just a clarification, Ms. Willie, this is proposed by Kauai, not Maui. Okay. Ms. Yoff, you, okay, go ahead, Mr. Clerk.
Ms. Yoff,
Aye.
Ms. Ford,
Aye.
Mr. Ilagan,
Aye.
Mr. Kanuha, Mr. Kern,
Aye.
Ms. Poindexter,
Aye.
Ms. Willie,
No.
Chair Onishi.
Aye.
Chair Onishi, you have 7 ayes, 1 no, 1 excuse.
Okay, item number 4 is accepted by this council. Okay, item number 7 is a bill relating, a bill for an act relating to health proposed by Hawaii County, and this is in regards to the continued funding for the Hilo Medical Center Primary Care Training Program. Any discussion? Oh, I'm sorry, may I have a motion to accept? Ms. Ford, second by Mr. Kern. Okay, discussion. Ms. Ford.
Okay. This is our residency program over in Hilo. May I ask you a question, Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Okay. When the last time you went to the meeting, I think there was, excuse me, one of the counties was objecting to this, claiming that this was a Hawaii County issue, excuse me. Is that discussion still going on?
No, it's not. They all approved this.
Okay, they understand then that this is a state issue, no different than having classes for whatever over in Honolulu. We've got this program over here for us.
Correct.
Okay, I support this.
Any other discussions? Ms. Willie?
Yeah, just to note, I will again oppose this, given my, again, discussed with HSAC. But were it to fail, I would work on getting something separately done through the state. So I stand by my position.
Okay, any further discussion? Okay, Mr. Clerk?
Ms. Yoff,
Aye.
Ms. Ford,
Aye.
Mr. Ilagan,
Aye.
Mr. Kanuha,
Aye.
Mr. Kern, Ms. Poindexter,
Aye.
Ms. Willie,
Nope.
Chair Onishi.
Aye.
Chair Onishi, you have 7 ayes,
Item
1
number-
no, and 1 excuse.
Okay. Item number 7 is approved by this council. Okay, so now we have items number 5, 6, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, and 14. I know you folks want to discuss on some of it.
I just want to ask you.
Yes, Ms. Poindexter.
I just wanted to ask you to maybe summarize for the rest of the council that was not at the HSAC meeting about the item number 5, a bill for an act relating to transient accommodations tax,
Okay.
and what could happen. And I just want to say, I'm so glad that I did attend that meeting, because we had a good dialogue, and I understood now more of what had happened and how it happened. So it's unfortunate, Councilmember Willie, that you were not able to attend that meeting because you had an emergency. However, I think if you attended that meeting and you had the dialogue with them, you could have understood why, what happened and the reasons for things being voted down the way they were voted. So I'm glad I attended. So if you can explain about that tax and what can happen.
If we're gonna do that, then we're gonna have to explain on everyone.
Yeah.
Because that's how I feel that we're gonna have to do it. So, because of time-wise, we would have to table all this until after maybe the finance committee.
Okay.
So if you folks want to have a discussion on the items that are not going to be on the HSAC, okay, go ahead, Mr. Kanoa.
Knowing how this is taking so far, we might be at this for a while if we're going to continue and going on discussion for all these single items. So I know my committee was supposed to start at
Correct. How about
9:45.
correct?
And we
So
might
25.
have members in Kona that may be part of my committee, so just don't want to
Okay.
go on for an
So
hour and a
let's
half.
have a motion to table this until the end of the finance committee.
I wouldn't say table it, because I would just suggest that the minutes maybe of that HSAC meeting that just took place could be given to just everybody. I mean, then it explains it. Then we can move this along. We don't have to table it. Because the minutes of that meeting will explain that there's a way that the TAT might be able to be brought forward again.
Right.
So,
But, okay,
the
so, but
minutes
if,
explain
so if we're
that.
gonna make a discussion on one item, I know other council members might wanna discuss on other items. So to make it fair, because I know there's gonna be some more discussion, I would rather have this tabled until the end. Because unless we're going to vote it all one time, then it's okay. But if we want to have discussion, and then I know other council members have other discussions on other items, so I think to be fair, we should just table it. So let's have a motion to table.
I think that's appropriate. You table within one agenda. You just recess this meeting until
Okay.
the end.
Okay. Let's have
You don't need to motion. Just as the chair, you can.
No, I understand. Okay. Let's have okay. I'm gonna recess this meeting until the end of the finance committee. Okay. Okay.
Okay, I just want to go and vote.
I know. Brenda wants to
She
talk.
does. Did Brenda want?